Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I've been driving 18-wheelers for almost 15 years now. Long hauls across the Midwest, sometimes down south through Texas, occasionally up through Montana when the routes demand it. You see a lot of strange things when you spend that much time on the road. Most of it you learn to ignore. The weird roadside attractions, the towns that look frozen in time, the people who seem a little too interested in watching you fuel up at 3 a.m. But there's one night I can't shake, no matter how many miles I put between myself and that stretch of highway. It was late October, around 2:30 in the morning. I was hauling a load of agricultural equipment from Des Moines down to a depot outside of Kansas City. The route took me through some pretty desolate country, and the kind where you can drive for 40 minutes without seeing another pair of headlights. The radio had lost signal about an hour back, so I was listening to an old podcast I'd downloaded, something about unsolved mysteries. The cab was warm, the heater humming steadily, and I had a thermos of coffee wedged between my legs. That's when I saw him. He was standing on the shoulder of Highway 169 right where the road curved through a patch of dense forest. No car nearby, no broken-down vehicle, nothing. Just a man in a dark jacket with his thumb out, illuminated briefly by my headlights as I approached. Now, I've got a strict rule about hitchhikers. I don't pick them up, ever. It's not worth the risk, and company policy is crystal clear on the matter. But something about this guy made me slow down. Maybe it was the way he stood so still, like a statue. Or maybe it was the fact that he was alone out there in the middle of nowhere, and some part of me felt bad just leaving him. I eased off the gas, my rig slowing with a hiss of air brakes, and I pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet past him. I told myself I'd just ask if he needed me to call someone, maybe offer to radio ahead to the next town. I rolled down the passenger window as he walked up. The cold October air rushed into the cab, carrying the smell of damp leaves and earth. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s with a thin face and dark hair that hung over his forehead. His jacket looked too light for the weather, and he wasn't carrying a bag or anything. "Need some help?" I called out. He smiled. Not a warm smile, but not threatening either. Just flat. "I could use a ride," he said. His voice was quiet, almost too quiet to hear over the idling engine. I hesitated. "Where you headed?" "South," he said simply. "Same direction you're going?" I should have driven off right then. The way he said it, like he already knew where I was going, should have been enough, but I'm not proud to admit that I felt a little sorry for him, and maybe a part of me was just tired of being alone in the cab. "All right," I said against every instinct I had. "Hop in." He climbed up into the passenger seat with an ease that surprised me, like he'd done it 100 times before. He didn't say anything as I pulled back onto the highway, just sat there with his hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead through the windshield. The podcast was still playing softly through the speakers, but I reached over and turned it off. The silence felt heavy. "So what were you doing out there?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Waiting," he said. "Waiting for what?" He didn't answer right away, just kept staring ahead. When he finally spoke, his voice was even quieter than before. "For you, I guess." I laughed, but it came out forced. "Lucky timing, then." He turned his head slowly to look at me, and that's when I noticed his eyes. They were dark, almost black in the dim light of the cab, and they didn't blink. "Not luck," he said. "I've been waiting a long time, Michael." My blood went cold. I hadn't told him my name. I know I hadn't. My name isn't on the truck, it's not on my jacket. There's no way he could have known. How do you know my name? I asked, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. He smiled again, that same flat smile. I know a lot of things. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, my pulse starting to hammer in my ears. Who are you? Just a traveler, he said. Like you? The highway stretched out ahead of us, empty and dark. The trees on either side seemed to close in, their branches reaching over the road like skeletal fingers. I glanced at the speedometer. I was doing 65, maybe 70. Too fast to just pull over and kick him out safely. You seem nervous, Michael, he said, his voice taking on an almost amused tone. You don't need to be. I'm not here to hurt you. Then what do you want? I demanded. He leaned back in the seat, his eyes drifting to the window. I just want to ride for a while. It gets lonely out here. You understand that, don't you? All those miles, all that time alone. It does something to a person. I didn't respond. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. I thought about reaching for my phone, maybe calling the cops, but it was in the cup holder near the gear shift, and I didn't want to take my eyes off the road. Or off him. You've driven this route before, he continued, his voice almost dreamy now. Many times. You know the landmarks, the old barn with the collapsed roof, the bridge over Willow Creek, the gas station with the flickering sign that says, open 24 hours, even though it hasn't been open in years. He was right. I do all of those places. But how did he? I've seen you pass by, he said, as if reading my thoughts. More times than you'd think. You just never stopped before. I shouldn't have stopped this time, I muttered. He laughed softly. It was a dry sound, like wind through dead grass. No, probably not. We drove in silence for another 10 minutes, though it felt like hours. I kept glancing over at him, expecting him to do something, to say something, but he just sat there, staring out the window. The forest eventually gave way to open fields, and I saw a sign for the next town, Cameron, population 3,200. Relief washed over me. I'm stopping up here, I said, my voice firm. You're getting out. He didn't argue, just nodded slowly. That's fine. I pulled into the parking lot of a truck stop on the edge of town, the fluorescent lights harsh and bright after the darkness of the highway. There were a few other rigs parked there, their drivers probably inside getting coffee or catching a few hours of sleep. I threw the rig into park and turned to face him. Get out, I said. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached for the door handle. It was nice riding with you, Michael, he said. Maybe I'll see you again. I don't think so, I shot back. He smiled one last time, and then he was gone, dropping down out of the cab and disappearing into the shadows beyond the reach of the parking lot lights. I watched him go, my heart still pounding, and then I locked the doors and sat there for a solid 5 minutes, just trying to calm down. I went inside the truck stop, ordered a coffee I didn't drink, and asked the guy behind the counter if he'd seen anyone walking around outside. He said no. Said it had been dead quiet all night. I got back on the road an hour later, and I didn't stop again until I reached the depot in Kansas City. I told myself it was just some drifter, some weirdo who'd gotten lucky guessing my name, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Because 3 weeks later, I was driving the same route, and I saw him again, same spot, same dark jacket, same thumb out. This time I didn't stop. But as I passed him, I glanced in my side mirror. He was standing there in the middle of the road, watching me drive away, and I swear, even from that distance, I could see him smiling. I still drive that route sometimes. I don't have a choice, it's part of my job. But I never look at the shoulder anymore. I keep my eyes on the road ahead, the radio turned up loud, and I don't stop for anything, because I know he's still out there, waiting. I've always been the kind of driver who plans everything down to the last detail. Fuel stops, rest breaks, meal times. I like to know where I'm going and when I'll get there. It keeps me sane when I'm spending 12, 14 hours a day behind the wheel. So when I tell you that I stopped at a rest area that doesn't exist, you'll understand why it messed with my head so badly. This happened about 2 years ago, early spring. I was hauling a load of electronics from Atlanta up to a warehouse in Pittsburgh. It was a straightforward run, mostly Interstate 75 and then 77 through the Appalachians. I'd done it dozens of times before, but this trip, something was different from the start. The weather was bad, for one thing. Not terrible, but enough to slow me down. Heavy rain, the kind that makes the road slick and turns your windshield into a blur, even with the wipers going full speed. I'd left Atlanta around 4 in the afternoon, planning to drive through the night and arrive in Pittsburgh by mid-morning. But the rain was eating into my time, and by 11 p.m. I was only halfway through Tennessee, nowhere near where I wanted to be. I was tired. My eyes felt heavy, and I'd already downed 2 energy drinks that weren't doing much anymore. I needed to stop, stretch my legs, maybe splash some water on my face. I knew there was a rest area coming up somewhere along this stretch of 75, one of those basic pull-offs with bathrooms and vending machines. I'd stopped there before, but when I saw the sign, something felt off. It was one of those blue informational signs, the kind that tells you a rest area is ahead in 2 miles. But the lettering looked wrong, faded maybe, or just older than it should have been. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Still, I needed to stop, so I kept going, watching for the exit. The rain was coming down even harder now, and the road was nearly empty. I hadn't seen another vehicle in at least 20 minutes when the rest area finally appeared. I almost missed it. There were no lights, none of the usual bright floodlights that illuminate those places at night, just a dark patch of asphalt off to the right, barely visible through the rain. I slowed down and pulled in, my headlights cutting through the downpour. The parking lot was small, smaller than I remembered, and completely empty. No other trucks, no cars. The building sat at the far end, a low, squat structure that looked more like an old highway service station than a modern rest stop. The windows were dark. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, windshield wipers thumping back and forth. Something about the place made me uneasy, but I told myself I was just tired. I'd been driving too long, my nerves were fried, and the bad weather wasn't helping. I grabbed my flashlight from the door compartment and climbed out of the cab. The rain hit me immediately, cold and stinging. I jogged across the parking lot toward the building, my boots splashing through puddles. The front door was unlocked, which surprised me. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Damp, stale air mixed with something else, something sour, like mildew or rotting wood. I clicked on my flashlight and swept the beam around. The interior was dim, lit only by a few weak emergency lights near the ceiling. There was a row of vending machines along one wall, their glass fronts dusty and dark. A hallway led off to the left, probably to the bathrooms. Everything looked old, like it hadn't been maintained in years. But that didn't make sense. I'd stopped at this rest area before, maybe 6 months ago, and it had been fine. Clean, well lit, normal. I walked over to the vending machines, thinking I'd grab a snack, but when I got close, I realized they were empty. Completely empty. No drinks, no chips, nothing. Just bare metal shelves inside. The coin slots were rusted over. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the rain. I turned toward the hallway, my flashlight beam shaking slightly in my hand. "Hello," I called out. My voice echoed off the concrete walls. But there was no response. I should have left right then. I should have walked straight back to my truck and kept driving, but I needed to use the bathroom, and I figured I'd come this far already. I started down the hallway, my footsteps echoing loudly in the silence. The bathroom door was propped open with a wooden wedge. I pushed it wider and stepped inside, the flashlight beam sweeping over cracked tile walls and a row of sinks coated in grime. The mirrors above the sinks were fogged over, like someone had just taken a hot shower, but the air was cold. My breath came out in faint clouds. I used the urinal quickly, not bothering to wash my hands, and turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A sound from deeper in the building, a low scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I froze, my heart jumping into my throat. "Hello," I called again, louder this time. "Anyone there?" The scraping stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I backed out of the bathroom and into the hallway, my flashlight darting around frantically. The beam landed on a door at the far end of the hall, one I hadn't noticed before. It was partially open, just a crack, and darkness spilled out from the other side. I don't know why I walked toward it. Curiosity, maybe. Or stupidity. Probably both. I reached the door and nudged it open with my foot, shining the flashlight inside. It was a storage room, or at least it had been. Now it was just a mess of broken furniture, old signs, and stacked crates covered in dust and cobwebs. But that's not what made my blood run cold. In the center of the room, illuminated by my flashlight, was a truck driver's jacket. It was draped over a chair, the reflective strips on the sleeves catching the light, and on the back, stitched in faded letters, was a name. Carl Hutchins. I knew that name. Carl Hutchins had been a driver for the same company I worked for. He disappeared about 3 years ago, somewhere along a route in Tennessee. They never found him. Just his rig, abandoned on the side of the highway with the keys still in the ignition. My hands started to shake. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I turned and ran back down the hallway, my boots pounding against the floor. I burst through the front door and into the rain, sprinting across the parking lot to my truck. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if anything was following me. I climbed into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I threw the truck into gear, peeling out of that parking lot like the devil himself was on my tail. I drove for another 2 hours straight, not stopping until I reached a well-lit truck stop just outside Knoxville. I sat in the parking lot with the engine running, the heater blasting, trying to calm down. My shirt was soaked with rain and sweat, and my heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. The next day, after I'd delivered my load in Pittsburgh, I called my dispatcher and told him what had happened. He listened quietly, and when I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "There's no rest area on that part of 75, he finally said, "not for at least 50 miles in either direction." I insisted I'd been there. I described the building, the vending machines, the jacket with Carl Hutchins' name on it. He told me I must have been confused, that I'd probably pulled into an old service station or something and gotten turned around in the storm. But I know what I saw. I know where I stopped, and I know that rest area wasn't supposed to be there. I've driven that route a dozen times since then, and I've never seen it again. No sign, no exit, nothing. It's like it just vanished. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving through that part of Tennessee, I catch myself looking for it, watching the side of the road, half expecting to see that dark patch of asphalt and the low building with no lights. I hope I never find it again. But I have a feeling it's still out there, waiting for the next driver who's tired enough, desperate enough, or unlucky enough to stop. Most truckers don't use CB radios much anymore. We've got cell phones now, GPS, all the modern stuff. But I still keep mine on, usually tuned to channel 19, the trucker channel. You get a lot of chatter on there, Guys warning each other about speed traps or accidents up ahead, sometimes just shooting the breeze to pass the time. It's comforting in a way, knowing there are other people out there on the road with you even if you never see them. But after what had happened last summer, I don't turn my CB on anymore. I can't, because I'm afraid of what I might hear. It was late July, brutally hot, the kind of heat that makes the asphalt shimmer and turns your truck into an oven if you're not running the AC full blast. I was driving a long haul from Amarillo, Texas, up to Denver, Colorado, mostly taking Highway 87 north through the Panhandle and then cutting west. It's desolate country out there, especially once you get past the small towns. Just flat plains stretching out in every direction, the sky huge and empty above you. I'd been on the road for about 6 hours, and the sun was just starting to set, turning the horizon into a streak of orange and red. The CB had been quiet most of the day, just the occasional burst of static or a brief exchange between drivers I couldn't quite make out. I had the radio on low, more for background noise than anything else. That's when I heard her. It started as a whisper, so faint I almost didn't catch it. Just a voice, soft and distant, cutting through the static. I turned up the volume, thinking maybe someone was trying to reach me, but the voice didn't get any clearer. It was a woman, I was pretty sure of that, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. "Hello," I said into the handset, pressing the button. "You're coming through pretty weak. Can you repeat that?" The static hissed for a moment, and then the voice came again, a little louder this time. "Help me." I felt a prickle run down my spine. The way she said it, so quiet and desperate, made my chest tighten. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice sharper now. "What's wrong?" There was a pause, and then she spoke again, her words slow and deliberate. "I'm lost. Please. I need help." I glanced at the CB, frowning. This wasn't normal. Truckers don't usually call for help like that over the radio, not unless it's an emergency. And even then, they're more direct about it. And the way she sounded, it didn't feel right. "What's your location?" I asked. "Are you in a vehicle? Can you see any landmarks?" The static crackled, and for a moment I thought I'd lost her. Then her voice came back, clearer now, and I could hear the fear in it. "I don't know where I am. It's dark. Please, I need someone to find me." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I glanced around at the empty road ahead of me, the sun sinking lower on the horizon. There wasn't a car in sight. No houses, no buildings, nothing. "All right, just stay calm," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you have a phone? Can you call 911? "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, just come find me. I'm scared." I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to help, to turn around and start searching, but I didn't have any idea where she was, and something about the whole situation felt wrong. Off. "I need more information," I said. "Can you tell me anything about where you are? A road name, a town, anything?" There was another long pause, and then she spoke again, but this time her voice was different, colder, flatter. "You're close." A chill ran through me. "What do you mean I'm close?" "Close to what?" "To me," she said simply. I scanned the road ahead, my pulse quickening. The highway was empty, the plains stretching out on either side. There was no one, no cars, no trucks, nothing. "Where are you?" I demanded, my voice rising. "I can't see anyone." The static hissed again, and then she laughed. It was a soft, hollow sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Keep driving," she said. "You'll find me." I released the button on the handset and just sat there, staring at the radio. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. This didn't make sense. None of it made sense. I thought about turning off the CB, but before I could, she spoke again. "Don't turn it off," she said, like she'd read my mind. "I'll be gone if you do." "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer right away. The static crackled and popped, and I thought maybe she'd disappeared. But then her voice came through one more time, so quiet I almost missed it. "I was like you once," she said, "driving through the night, alone, and then I stopped." "Stopped where?" I asked. "At the wrong place," she said, "and now I can't leave." The line went dead. The static faded to silence, and no matter how many times I tried to call back, there was no response, just empty air. I drove in silence for the next hour, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I kept glancing at the CB, half expecting her voice to come back, but it stayed quiet. Eventually, I turned it off and didn't turn it back on for the rest of the trip. When I got to Denver, I asked around at the truck stop, trying to find out if anyone else had heard a woman's voice on the radio that night. Most guys just shook their heads or gave me strange looks. But one older driver, a guy named Frank who'd been hauling for 30 years, pulled me aside. "You heard her, didn't you?" he said quietly. I nodded. "You know who she is?" He looked around like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "There's stories," he said, "about a woman who died out on those plains years ago. Her car broke down and she tried to call for help on a CB radio she had in the trunk. But no one came. They found her a week later, dead from exposure." I felt my stomach drop. "And people have heard her?" "Some say they have," Frank said. "Always on Channel 19, always asking for help. But no one's ever been able to find her." I didn't sleep well that night, or the night after. And even now, months later, I can't bring myself to turn on the CB radio, because I'm afraid that if I do, I'll hear her again, and this time, she might tell me where she is. If you're still listening, you probably enjoy stories like this. A like or a comment helps keep them alive. There's a diner off Interstate 40 in New Mexico, somewhere between Tucumcari and Albuquerque. I don't remember the exact mile marker, and honestly, I'm not sure I could find it again if I tried, but I stopped there once, about 3 years ago, and I've regretted it ever since. It was late, past midnight, and I'd been driving for 11 hours straight. My back ached, my eyes were dry and burning, and my stomach was growling loud enough to hear over the engine. I needed food, and I needed to stretch my legs before I ended up nodding off at the wheel. When I saw the sign for the diner, lit up in flickering neon against the darkness, I didn't think twice. I just took the exit and pulled into the gravel parking lot. The place looked old, like it had been there since the 60s or 70s and hadn't been updated since. The building was low and rectangular, with big plate glass windows along the front and a neon sign that read "Eat" in buzzing red letters. There were a couple of other vehicles in the lot, a beat-up sedan and an old pickup truck, both covered in dust. My rig looked out of place next to them, big and modern, the chrome gleaming under the parking lot lights. I climbed down from the cab and stretched, feeling my spine crack in about 3 places. The air was cool and dry, carrying the faint smell of sagebrush. I locked the truck and headed for the diner entrance, my boots crunching on the gravel. The inside was just as dated as the outside. Vinyl booths along the walls, a long counter with chrome stools, checkered linoleum floor that was cracked and yellowed with age. A jukebox sat in the corner, dark and silent. There were a few people inside, an old man sitting alone at the counter, nursing a cup of coffee, and a young couple in one of the booths, barely touching the food in front of them. They all looked up when I walked in, their faces blank and expressionless, and then went back to what they were doing. A waitress appeared from the back, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a stained apron. She gestured to an empty booth near the window. "Sit anywhere, hun," she said, her voice flat. I slid into the booth and picked up the laminated menu that was propped between the napkin holder and the ketchup bottle. The choices were pretty standard. Burgers, fries, meatloaf, chicken fried steak. My stomach rumbled again, and I decided on a burger and coffee. The waitress came over with a pot of coffee and a chipped mug. She poured without asking. The liquid dark and steaming. "What'll it be?" she asked. "Cheeseburger and fries," I said. "Medium rare." She scribbled something on her pad and walked away without another word. I took a sip of the coffee. It was strong, almost bitter, but it was hot, and that was good enough. I glanced around the diner while I waited. The old man at the counter was still staring into his coffee cup, not drinking, just staring. The couple in the booth hadn't moved. Their food sat untouched, and they were looking at each other with strange, vacant expressions, like they'd forgotten how to speak. Something about the place felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. It was too quiet, maybe. No music, no conversation, just the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional clink of silverware. The waitress brought my food a few minutes later, setting the plate down in front of me with a dull thud. The burger looked fine, nothing special, but I was too hungry to care. I picked it up and took a bite. It tasted like ash. I stopped chewing, my face twisting in disgust. The meat was flavorless, dry, like it had been sitting under a heat lamp for hours. The bun was stale, and the cheese had a weird chemical tang to it. I forced myself to swallow and set the burger back down on the plate. "Everything all right?" the waitress asked, appearing beside the table like she'd materialized out of thin air. "It's fine," I lied. I didn't want to cause a scene. I just wanted to eat something, anything, and get back on the road. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable, and then walked away. I picked at the fries, but they weren't any better. They were cold and soggy, tasting faintly of old grease. I pushed the plate away and drained the rest of my coffee, which at least was drinkable. That's when I noticed the old man at the counter was looking at me. Not just glancing, but staring, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I met his gaze for a second, and then he smiled. It was a slow, deliberate smile, and it didn't reach his eyes. I looked away quickly, my pulse quickening. I pulled out my wallet and dropped a 20 on the table, way more than the meal was worth, but I didn't care. I just wanted to leave. As I stood up, the waitress reappeared, blocking my path to the door. "You didn't finish your food," she said, her voice still flat, but there was something underneath it now, something cold. "I'm not that hungry," I said, trying to step around her. She moved with me, staying in my way. "You should finish," she said. "Waste not, want not." "I really need to get going," I said, more firmly this time. She stared at me for what felt like forever, and then stepped aside. "Suit yourself," she said. I walked past her and out the door, not looking back. The cool night air hit me like a slap, and I sucked in a deep breath, my heart pounding. I didn't run to my truck, but I walked fast, my keys already in my hand. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors, then fired up the engine. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced back at the diner. The waitress was standing in the doorway, watching me, and so was the old man from the counter and the couple from the booth. They were all standing there, side by side, staring at me with those same blank, expressionless faces. I hit the gas and didn't look back again. I've thought about that diner a lot since then. I've even tried to find it on maps, thinking maybe I could figure out what the hell was going on there. But I've never been able to locate it. The exit I took doesn't show up on any map I've looked at, and when I've driven that stretch of Interstate 40 since, I've never seen the sign. But I know it's out there, somewhere between Tucumcari and Albuquerque, hidden just off the highway. And I know that if I ever see that flickering neon sign again, I won't stop. Because whatever that place was, it wasn't just a diner, and the people inside weren't just people. I don't usually drive at night if I can help it. The roads are emptier, sure, and you can make good time, but there's something about the darkness that gets to me. Maybe it's the isolation, or the way your headlights only show you a narrow slice of the world while everything else fades into black. But sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes the schedule demands it. That's how I ended up driving through Wyoming in the middle of the night, hauling a load of furniture from Salt Lake City to Billings, Montana. It was early November, cold and clear, the kind of night where you can see a million stars overhead. The highway was nearly deserted. Just me and the occasional set of taillights far ahead or headlights in the distance behind. I was about an hour north of Rawlins when I first noticed them. 3 sets of headlights, all in a row, maybe half a mile back. At first, I didn't think much of it. Truckers sometimes travel in groups, especially on long hauls. It's safer that way. Someone to talk to on the CB, someone to help if you break down. But something about these trucks felt different. They were staying exactly the same distance behind me, not closing the gap, not falling back, just maintaining that half-mile spacing like they were locked on to me. I kept an eye on them in my mirrors, and after about 20 minutes, I started to feel uneasy. I reached for my CB and switched to channel 19. This is eastbound on I-90, mile marker 170. Anyone back there in the convoy want to check in? Static. No response. I tried again. Come on, guys. You're making me nervous back there. Just want to make sure we're all good. More static. But I could see the headlights in my mirror, steady and unwavering. I eased off the gas a little, letting my speed drop from 70 to 65. I figured if they were just normal drivers, they'd pass me, or at least close the distance. But they didn't. They slowed down too, maintaining that same exact spacing. My unease turned to fear. I sped back up to 75, pushing my rig a little harder than I should have. The headlights behind me sped up too, matching me perfectly. What the hell? I muttered, my hands gripping the wheel tighter. I tried the CB again, my voice sharper now. All right, this isn't funny. Whoever you are, back off. Silence, just the hiss of static. I considered pulling over, letting them pass, but something told me that was a bad idea. Something told me that if I stopped, they'd stop too. And I didn't want to find out what would happen after that. So I kept driving. For the next hour, those 3 sets of headlights stayed right where they were, following me through the darkness like shadows. My heart was pounding, my shirt soaked with sweat despite the cold. I kept checking my mirrors over and over, hoping they'd turn off or disappear, but they never did. Then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, they were gone. I glanced in my mirror, and the road behind me was empty. No headlights, no trucks, nothing, just darkness. I didn't stop. I drove straight through to Billings, not even pausing for fuel, and when I got there, I asked around at the truck stop, trying to find out if anyone else had seen a convoy on I-90 that night. No one had. To this day, I don't know who they were or what they wanted. But I know they were following me, and I know they disappeared just as suddenly as they appeared. Sometimes, late at night, I still check my mirrors, half expecting to see those 3 sets of headlights again. I hope I never do. Interstate 70 cuts through the heart of Kansas, and if you've ever driven it, you know how monotonous it can be. Flat farmland stretching out in every direction, the horizon so far away it feels like you're never going to reach it. It's the kind of road where you can zone out if you're not careful, your mind going numb from the sameness of it all. I was driving east, late afternoon, the sun low and orange behind me. I'd been on the road since morning, and I was starting to feel the fatigue settle into my bones. My eyes were heavy, and I was thinking about finding a place to stop for the night when I saw her. She was standing in the median, right in the middle of the grass strip that separates the eastbound and westbound lanes. Just standing there, perfectly still, facing the eastbound traffic, facing me. I caught sight of her from maybe a quarter-mile away, and at first I thought she was a mannequin or some kind of prank. But as I got closer, I realized she was real, a woman, maybe in her 30s, wearing a long white dress that fluttered slightly in the wind. Her hair was dark and hung down past her shoulders. Her arms were at her sides, and she wasn't moving, just staring. I slowed down instinctively, my eyes locked on her. She didn't wave, didn't gesture for help, didn't do anything. Just stood there, watching the traffic pass. As I drew level with her, I got a good look at her face. It was pale, almost ghostly, and her expression was completely blank. Empty. Her eyes followed my truck as I passed, turning slowly to track me, but she didn't move otherwise. I glanced in my side mirror, and she was still there, still watching. A chill ran through me, and I pressed down on the gas, eager to put distance between us. I grabbed the CB handset. "Anyone else see that?" I said, my voice tight. "Woman standing in the median, just west of Salina. Someone should call it in." A voice crackled back immediately. "What woman?" "In the median," I repeated. "White dress, just standing there. You couldn't miss her." "Buddy, I just passed that spot," the voice said. There was no one there. I looked in my mirror again. The woman was gone. The median was empty. My blood turned to ice. I've driven that stretch of I-70 many times since, and I've never seen her again, but I've heard stories from other drivers. Stories about a woman in a white dress, standing in the median, always watching, never moving. Some say she's a ghost, others say she's something worse. All I know is that I saw her, and I never want to see her again. There's a stretch of Highway 93 in Nevada that cuts through some of the emptiest country you'll ever see. It's called the loneliest road in America for a reason. You can drive for an hour without seeing another soul. Just endless desert and mountains in the distance. It's beautiful in a stark, alien kind of way, but it's also unnerving. You feel very small out there, very alone. I was driving north through that stretch, hauling a load of mining equipment to Ely. It was mid-afternoon, the sun beating down mercilessly, turning the inside of my cab into an oven even with the AC running full blast. The road was empty. As usual, just me and the heat shimmer rising off the asphalt. That's when I saw the truck. It was pulled off on the shoulder, a big rig just like mine, sitting there with its hazard lights flashing. As I got closer, I could see the driver's door was open, hanging ajar like someone had gotten out in a hurry. I slowed down, my instincts telling me to stop and check. Maybe the driver had broken down, maybe they needed help. I pulled over about 50 feet ahead of the rig and climbed out, the heat hitting me like a physical force. "Hello?" I called out, walking toward the abandoned truck. "Anyone here?" No response. The desert was silent except for the faint ticking of the other truck's engine cooling down. I approached cautiously, peering into the cab. The keys were still in the ignition, and there was a half-empty bottle of water in the cup holder. The CB radio was on, hissing softly with static. But there was no sign of the driver. I looked around, scanning the desert. Nothing, no footprints in the dust, no one walking along the road. It was like the driver had just vanished. I grabbed the CB handset from the abandoned truck and tried calling. "This is northbound on 93, just south of Ely. Got an abandoned rig here. Driver missing. Anyone copy?" Static. I tried again, and still nothing. A feeling of dread settled over me. I backed away from the truck and returned to my own rig, my heart pounding. I called 911 on my cell phone and reported what I'd found, giving them the location and description of the truck. The dispatcher thanked me and said they'd send someone out. I didn't wait. I got back on the road and drove away as fast as I could. Later that night, I called the Nevada Highway Patrol to follow up. They told me they'd found the truck right where I said it was, but they never found the driver. To this day, I don't know what happened to him. And I don't want to know. I was driving through Arkansas, somewhere on Highway 65 between Conway and Marshall. It was late, close to midnight, and the road was dark and winding, cutting through dense forest on both sides. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the trees, and I was taking it slow, careful on the curves. That's when I saw him. He was standing on the side of the road just at the edge of my headlight's reach. A man, tall and thin, wearing dark clothes. And he was waving at me, not frantically like he needed help, just a slow, deliberate wave, back and forth. I slowed down, uncertain. Part of me wanted to stop, but something about the way he was standing there, the way he was waving, felt wrong. As I passed him, I glanced in my side mirror. He was still waving, still watching. I drove on, and about 5 minutes later, I saw him again. Same man. Same dark clothes, same slow wave, standing in the exact same position just at the edge of my headlights. My heart started to race. I sped up, my hands trembling on the wheel. 5 minutes later, he was there again, and again, and again. Every 5 minutes for the next hour, I saw him. Always in the same spot, always waving. I don't know who he was or how he kept appearing, but I know he wasn't human. I didn't stop driving until I was out of Arkansas. There's a story that circulates among truckers who drive through Montana. It's about a phantom truck, an old Peterbilt that appears out of nowhere on Highway 2, usually late at night. They say it has no driver, no license plate, and no lights except for the headlights that burn impossibly bright. I never believed it, until I saw it myself. It was 3 in the morning, and I was driving east on Highway 2 just past Shelby. The road was empty, the night clear and cold. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. Then I saw the headlights in my mirror. They were bright, too bright, and they were closing fast. I eased over to let the truck pass, but it didn't. It just stayed right behind me, its headlights blazing in my mirrors, blinding me. I sped up, and it sped up. I slowed down, and it slowed down. No matter what I did, it stayed right there, inches from my bumper. I was terrified. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to do. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The headlights vanished, and I was alone again. I pulled over and sat there for 10 minutes trying to calm down. I don't know what that truck was, but I know it wasn't normal. I still drive Highway 2, but I don't drive it at night anymore. I was parked at a rest area in Idaho, catching a few hours of sleep in my sleeper cab. It was around 2 in the morning, and the rest area was quiet, just a few other trucks scattered around the parking lot. I was drifting off when I heard it. A voice. Soft, barely a whisper, coming from somewhere inside the cab. "Are you awake?" it said. My eyes shot open. I sat up, my heart pounding, and looked around. The cab was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the dashboard lights. There was no one there. "Hello?" I said, my voice shaking. No response. Just silence. I told myself I'd been dreaming, that I'd imagined it. I lay back down and closed my eyes, and then I heard it again. "Are you awake?" This time I grabbed my flashlight and searched every inch of the cab, the sleeper bunk, the storage compartments under the seats. There was no one there. No one. But I heard that voice. And I know it wasn't a dream. I didn't sleep the rest of that night, and I've never parked at that rest area again. I'll never forget the time I hauled a refrigerated trailer full of meat from a processing plant in Nebraska to a distributor in Ohio. It was a routine job, nothing out of the ordinary. The trailer was sealed when I picked it up, and I didn't think twice about it. But on the second night, somewhere in Indiana, I started hearing noises coming from the trailer, scratching sounds like something moving around inside. I told myself it was just the refrigeration unit, or maybe the load shifting. But the sounds kept getting louder, more insistent. When I stopped at a truck stop to refuel, I decided to check the trailer. I unlocked the doors and opened them, and that's when I saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them, glowing in the darkness of the trailer, staring back at me. I slammed the door shut and got back in my cab, my hands shaking. I drove straight to Ohio and dropped the trailer off without looking inside again. I don't know what I saw, and I don't want to know. Some roads stay with you long after you've left them behind. Some faces, some voices, some shadows never really disappear. They're still out there, somewhere on the dark stretches of highway, waiting for the next driver to come along. I hope it's not you, but if it is, keep your doors locked. Keep your eyes on the road. And whatever you do, don't stop. Thanks for listening. If you made it through the darkness, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Drive safe out there.